Saluflava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuki. Coming up.
I think when you look at what's happening around the world right now, we're all human, so we can't help but feel.
Samoan fashion designer fatally shot. Also, 3 Pacific nations and US travel ban list. And
we don't have that influence to pressure them to change their policies.
The Oceans Conference in France wraps up. In the US, renowned Samoan fashion designer Arthur Folasa-Alu, best known as Afa-Alu, was fatally shot at a No Kings protest in Salt Lake City on Saturday. The incident occurred at a protest involving an estimated 10,000 participants. Police say the 39-year-old Utah resident was an innocent bystander who was hit by a bullet fired by security personnel at a person with a rifle heading towards the crowd. The man with the gun was wounded and has been arrested and charged by police. However, Afa died in hospital despite efforts by paramedics to save his life. Tributes are pouring in for Afa, whose work had been featured on international runways, including Project Runway TV show.
When I was in Samoa, we watched Project Runway. I always used to say, I'm going to be the first Samoan to be on that show. That's what I did. It's a huge accomplishment for me. It's something that I'm very proud of. But being on the show was very hard. The fashion industry, sometimes it's very mean. I think that was the main takeaway for me, is to always be kind, because the world needs it.
I spoke with fashion stylist and founder of the Pacific Fashion Fusion show, Nora Swan, who was a close friend of Afa-Alu. Talofalava Nora, first of all, how did you hear about the news of Afa-Alu's death and how did you react?
Talofa Susanna, I heard through a friend on Facebook. So she sent me a message asking me if I had known what had happened to Afa. And I replied and said, don't tell me he's passed away. And she confirmed it, and I was just, like everyone else, very, very shocked. Yeah.
What was your relationship like with Afa-Alu and how long have you known him for?
I met Afa-Alu in 2017. So we started having a conversation earlier on in the year because I wanted him to participate in Pacific Fusion Fashion Show. So we worked together really closely to get the US Embassy to sponsor him, to bring him over to 2017. And so that was the beginning of a really beautiful relationship because we had mutual respect for each other because, we were all about building and growing the Pacific fashion community. And so he came back to Pacific Fusion in 2019, again with the help of the US Embassy to New Zealand. And, they asked me, we've already sponsored him. Why have you put his name forward again? And I said, Afa consistently continues to grow in the Pacific fashion space. And he's such a great inspiration for a lot of Pacific people around the world with the work he's doing. And so that's why we needed to bring him back. And on that particular year, we asked him to run a workshop for our aspiring designers. So he ran a capacity building workshop to help Pacific people build their brands in mainstream.
What are some of your most treasured memories of working alongside with Afa? You've already mentioned the Pacific Fashion Fusion show, but what influence did he have on your own projects and within the Pacific fashion community?
I think one of the things I loved about Afa on a personal level was he was very authentic. Like, it didn't matter who you were. There was no such thing as statuses of Afa. Everyone was the same level. So I loved how he was always genuinely himself and treated everyone the same way. In a professional sense, he opened so many doors for Pacific people who kind of were looking beyond traditional Pasifika wear, if you know what I mean. So he really broke into mainstream fashion. He wasn't doing the typical Pacific wear that we all love and we all can relate to, and that's part of our own stories. But he allowed us to think outside of the boundary.
Did it come as a surprise to you, Nora, that Afa was taking part in these protests?
No. I think when you look at what's happening around the world right now, we're all human, so we can't help but feel. And so I'm not surprised that Afa was there. I know that it's a good cause that, it's so crazy what's happening in America and other places in the world, and he felt called to be there. And I know a lot of Pasifika people who have attended similar events because sometimes there's just some things that you can't turn your eye from.
Yeah, it sounded like he was politically engaged. Would you say?
Yeah, most definitely. I think if you're friends with Afa on social media, like he really, he's got his business page and then he's got his personal page, and he speaks his mind. He was never afraid to speak his mind, and so I did notice that he would say things that would ruffle a few feathers.
Yeah, and just on that note, with what's happening in the US, what are your thoughts on Trump's immigration policies and the reactions that it's received?
It's crazy. It's really crazy. And, if I bring it back locally, there's a connection there as well with what's happening in government too. And so I try not to speak too much about government, but we are living in crazy times right now. And so we need to really keep our faith strong and try not let it just overtake our lives. Yeah.
And just coming back to Afa, what legacy do you think he now leaves behind?
I had an earlier interview today, and I'm going to say it again. I think Afa was the best, and I say this confidently, the best Samoan fashion designer I've ever come across. Like everything that he was creating, each time a new collection came out, I was like, wow, just phenomenal designer. And he set the bar high, and I'm sure everyone will be really proud to say that, this work is because I'm trying to, get to Afa Alu's level.
Thank you so much, Nora, for your time. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I want to send my love to Afa's wife, Laura, and his 2 children, and want them to know that the Pacific fashion community in New Zealand are all thinking about them.
The Utah Office of the Medical Examiner will determine the official cause and manner of his death. The Trump administration is considering adding 36 additional countries to its travel ban list, including 3 from the Pacific. Kaya Selby has more.
Tonga, Tuvalu and Vanuatu are the island countries on the list circulated in an internal State Department memo seen by Reuters. These small Pacific island nations joined war-torn Syria and South Sudan on that list, among several others across Africa, Asia and the Caribbean. Associate Professor Anna Pauls from Massey University's Centre for Defence and Security Studies says it's not the first time Vanuatu has been called out by the Trump administration.
Back in March, Vanuatu was one of over 40 countries that was reported to be on the immigration watch list, and that related to Vanuatu's Golden Passport scheme. But the inclusion of Tonga, the inclusion of Tuvalu is surprising for many in the region.
However, Powell says it is the first time Tonga has ever been included.
They have a significant diaspora in the United States, particularly in California and Utah and Hawaii, and that could potentially impact the ability of the diaspora to move back and forwards. It also potentially impacts those Tongan students who are studying in the United States, and the students of other Pacific Island countries mentioned as well.
If the Trump administration acts on these recommendations, citizens and passport holders from Tonga, Vanuatu and Tuvalu will be banned from entering the United States, and those currently in America would be automatically earmarked for deportation.
Pacific leaders were hoping for a bigger focus on climate change at the United Nations Ocean Conference, which finished on Friday in Nice, France. One of the key aims of the conference was to get the High Seas Treaty ratified by 60 countries, which would bring it into force. It fell short by 10 countries, but many promised to do so by the end of this year. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
Vanuatu's Minister for Climate Change Adaptation, Ralph Regenvanu, said this when asked by a journalist if fossil fuels featured enough at the Ocean Conference.
Yeah, well, the short answer is, of course, it has not been discussed enough here. I mean, it is, as I said, it's the single greatest cause of the damage to the oceans we're seeing now, and we're not talking about it enough.
He says the Pacific is living through a climate emergency every day.
You're recovering, you're coming to the next one, you're facing another one, you're preparing for something. And for example, a lot of people living on the coast can no longer access fresh water like they used to. So just basic things being affected. So it is affecting all our lives. And those of us who are the most climate vulnerable now are simply living the future that we're all going to get there one day. And very soon.
Tuvalu's Prime Minister Filipe Tiao had a more positive stance about what was discussed regarding climate change at the conference.
I'm an optimist by nature, and I believe that this conference has contributed to the conversation.
But like Mr. Regenvanu, Mr. Tiao says he wants to see more action from big emitters.
As a small island developing country, we don't have that influence to pressure them to change their policies, but we need to sustain the pressure. And meeting of these sorts give us that opportunity for us to continue to tell our story.
The Ocean Conference lasted 5 days, co-hosted by France and Costa Rica. One of the key aims was to get the High Seas Treaty ratified by 60 countries to bring it into force. 50 countries had ratified it by Friday, with a dozen more promising to do so by the end of the year. There were also announcements of more than 20 new marine protected areas, including one in French Polynesia, encompassing its entire exclusive economic zone, about twice the size of mainland France. Mr. Teal says the ocean means everything to the people of Tuvalu.
It sustains our livelihood. It's our source of economic development. It's also the source of our protein in terms of the fisheries. Fisheries contribute to about 40% of our domestic budget, so it plays a vital role.
New Zealand committed $52 million to strengthen ocean governance in the Pacific, but Savindra Michael, the Permanent Secretary of Fiji's Environment and Climate Change Ministry, says Australia and New Zealand's fossil fuel expansion raises questions about their respect or lack of it towards the ocean.
So if Australia and New Zealand are going to expand oil and gas, that sends a very strong signal that the agreements or decisions that they have made internationally are not upheld. And so who do we hold account? Are there any governing mechanisms where we could legislatively or through the judicial system take them to court?
Mr. Michael says legislation is also needed to hold countries to account for transboundary waste like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Teenage counter-tenor Samuel Mataele is a rising star praised by judges at this year's Nicholas Tarling Aria competition for his Baroque style and phrasing. He was the winner of the 18 and under category, hosted by the Manukau Symphony Orchestra, and got to sing But Who May Abide from Handel's Oratorio Messiah. Mataele spoke with RNZ Concert's Brian Crump about when he was first discovered by his flute teacher, who introduced him to vocal coach Fiona Ferrens.
Her, together with my flute teacher, Lorna Wright, heard me singing. I was singing in a corridor on my way to go to a practice room at Sacred Heart College in the music department. And
can you remember what you were singing, Samuel?
I can clearly remember. I was singing Pani Sangeliku.
Really? Oh,
yes.
Fantastic.
And that sort of became my signature song for that year, really. I sang that everywhere.
Is it the Cesar Franck version?
Yes.
Ah, yep, I thought so. Yeah.
Yes,
wonderful.
And she heard me singing it, and she from there offered me lessons, and we've had them ever since.
Did she offer to teach you for free? Is that true?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes, she's offered to teach me for free, and she still does. She's
right.
The most amazing teacher ever.
Well, she must think that voice of yours is pretty special then.
I think she sees the passion I've got for singing, which is just as much as the passion she's got, because she obviously has a passion for music if she's able to sacrifice this much time to develop young artists like what she's doing.
What did your friends and family make of you singing counter-tenor?
It wasn't really a shock to them because I'd grown up singing, as I said, boy soprano, so they didn't really notice much of a change, really. They just asked me one day, are you ever going to sing anything else? And I said, well, I'm enjoying where I'm at right now, so I think I'll just keep going. So no, I don't. I think it's just been normal. I think it's my identity at this point.
There are lots of, now, Pacifica basses and baritones and tenors, but not, as far as I know, so many countertenors that are Pacifica.
Yes, I don't know any myself. I'm sure there might be some around.
How much hard work is involved in working on the singing voice that you have?
I would assume just the same amount of hard work that any other singer would develop into making sure they have a stable technique and using that technique to serve the music as best as we can.
Who keeps you motivated at home?
Really, it's myself. I've always been quite self-motivated when it comes to singing, to getting up, doing what I need to do. Oftentimes my family shoo me off to the room to go and practice when I'm in the living room and I'm making too much noise, but really my family are the most supportive. My mother takes me everywhere I need to go with no complaints, apart from the occasional, my eardrums are ringing.
Right. Do you sing a lot in the car when she's taking you?
Yes, that's probably where my mother gets the most eardrum rings, as you know. Singers, especially classical singers, to be able to project in a room with no microphone, imagine having to do that in a car with a passenger less than a meter next to you, you know.
Is your mum musical as well?
Not really. She enjoys listening to music, but she's not a musician herself.
It's interesting they came across the idea of giving you all instruments to keep you busy. Where do you think they got that idea from?
Well, they started with my older siblings, giving them piano lessons. Like I said, it was my mother's way of giving our siblings something to do, a hobby, somewhere where we can relax with. And for me, as a young singer, as a young person, I was, she says, singing before I was talking. So I think it was very clear to her that the idea of giving me music as something to fall on became giving me music as something to do, probably for the rest of my life.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.